All right, so I was going to Walmart, as most good stories start out. I was going to Walmart with my buddy Doug, and this is the same Doug that took me tire bowling at Walmart at 2 a.m. and back with giant cages for the playground balls with like the bungee cords that held them all in the cage. We definitely played basketball in the middle of Walmart with the bungee cage as the hoop and went tire bowling. But on this particular mission, thank you so much. We were on a serious mission. Doug had just taken a new position at his work, and he needed a desk for his home office. Now you may be thinking that's no big deal, but when you're on a budget and you need a desk, and there's no IKEA within probably 5 hours, where do you go? You go to Walmart. So we went to Walmart. Now, mind you, the Walmart furniture section has all of their furniture displayed fully assembled. And they look very nice, bolted to the stage that they are displayed on, and underneath are loads of what? Boxes. And so what I found out that day was that Doug was not as strong as he looked. His upper body strength was about the strength of a 7-year-old. And so I had to combination lift because it said, warning, heavy, use 7 people to lift this box, which we did. I think we crushed the plastic on the cart because they don't have the wheel carts, so we're trying to put it on top, and it literally is like sagging the cart down. So we used 2 carts because we're about to destroy a cart trying to get these boxes out of Walmart, at 10 o'clock at night, because that's when you go to buy desks at Walmart. And we pay for it, we get outside, and this was not well thought through. Doug drives a Camaro. And so we got the boxes in the Camaro with the back hatch, because back then it wasn't just a trunk, right? The old Camaros, there's like the glass and everything was like a hatch that came up, right? And so we have that, and it slid vertically like in between it, and this is a stick shift, so he can only get first and second gear, right? So we finally get back to his house, and I basically have to mammoth hug this thing into his office, and we get it in there, and we immediately open it up and see all the parts, and we start putting stuff together. Now, you would think 2 individuals as smart as we were would have no problem putting together this deck. And yet we got to about 2:30 a.m., and we had most of a desk assembled. And we had 3 that we had no idea where they went or why they were there, but we knew we missed something. And we had 2 boards left over that we threw all of it in his closet, and we called it good. Now, the desk never worked right, and none of the drawers opened or closed. I tell you this because on the side of the box said some assembly required, and there were instructions to follow. And I think as we look at working on our relationships the next 2 weeks, this week and next week, I think relationships are a lot like that. Some assembly required. There may be a manual. Sometimes you try to follow it. Sometimes you don't. There are steps in the process. But here's what I figured out with the missing screws and boards. If we don't have a firm foundation, if we don't start right, the relationship is like that desk. Missing screws, boards gone, manual wasn't followed. It's never going to work right. And all the stuff that you bring into a relationship, and I don't care what relationship it is foundational because there is one common denominator in every relationship you have. Do you know what it is? Is you. You are the common denominator. In all my relationships, I am the common denominator. So sometimes you can feel like you have no idea where you went wrong. You thought you followed everything right, and you get to the end and you've got some screws missing, or you've got some extra screws and boards, and you have no clue where to put them. And so relationships require assembly, and sometimes that feels a lot like a puzzle, doesn't it? Putting all the pieces together. And the foundational piece to relationship is yourself. And so this morning, what I thought we'd do is we'd jump into a passage of Scripture in Ephesians 5. And I'm going to do something that I've never done before. I'm not going to tell you stories the whole time. I'm going to give you 8 things to build a foundation. And I don't know why the list made sense, but the list made sense. And so today, I'm going to give you 8 things. And so we're just going to jump in. Ephesians chapter 5 is often referred to as the instructions for marriage chapter of the Bible, which is interesting because the guy who wrote it was never married. How many of you can get an amen on that? Like, you don't know. You know what I know? Okay. I don't know. There's too many no's in too many sentences. Too few sentences? Okay. We'll keep going. Anyway, Paul talked about marriage, but before he talked about marriage, in the early part of that chapter, he talked about you, like me. He talked about individually what we bring to the table. And when we talk about building that foundation, I think this is a great place to start. So we're going to start in Ephesians chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. They're going to be on the screen for you, but this verse, I want to tell you, is one of the foundational verses for Wayfinders. It really is. Here it goes. Follow God's example, therefore, as dearly loved children, and walk in the what? Way of love. Everybody say that again. Way of love. Just as Christ loved us and gave himself up for us as a fragrant offering and sacrifice to God. So here's the picture. The overarching thing that if you get this fundamental, if you get this foundation right, every relationship you have will be impacted exponentially if you get this one thing right. Walk in the way of love. Just walk in the way of love. How many of you would agree that you'd like to walk in the way of love, right? Love is patient. Love is kind. It doesn't boast. An envy. Like, you keep going on and on. The way of love is somehow selfless rather than selfish. The way of love is beautiful and reconciling rather than divisive and ugly, right? We keep going on and on. And I think we want that for ourselves. And so if we get this foundation right, we get everything else right. So here's something for you. How many of you would just realize that relationships are dynamic? They're dynamic. They're not static. There's an energy, there's a flow between you and the person you're in relationship with. Be that your boss, be that your spouse, be that your kids, be that your neighbor. There is an energy. Well, their dog keeps digging holes underneath my fence, and Like, there's an energy, right? And that energy can be positive, it can be negative, but it's dynamic. It's always changing. Does your boss ask you to stay late every Friday when you're trying to get out of the office, right? That would drive you nuts. And over time, there's an energy that happens with that. So it doesn't matter what the relationship is. There is an energy. It's responsive and dynamic. Every relationship. And in a covenant relationship, right? In a marriage relationship, for instance, it's also exclusive. There's a space between you that is just yours. It's no one else's. And that kind of makes it sacred. So I love that Paul opens up with this foundation, this way of love, because it kind of gives us 8 steps to build the right foundation. And so if you can imagine an instruction manual of how to do the way of love thing, we're going to look at these 8 steps found in Ephesians 5. The first 4 are don'ts, list of don'ts. And the second 4 are list of do's, because it's really negative, right? And what I found was, as you unpack the don'ts, the things that he says do, actually don't do that, but instead do this. It's really great. So let's just jump right in. Number 1, and we'll race through these. Don't be sexually immoral. Verse 3 says, but among you there should not be even a hint, everybody say a hint, of sexual immorality. Well, Paul, way to let the cat out of the bag. Way to start heavy, my friend. This, I guess we'll just start here, right? I don't think that anybody ever sets out with their life and says, hey, I'm going to be sexually immoral. Like, nobody wakes up and decides that, right? It starts with small compromising steps. Like, I don't know if you've been watching the news, but the Larry Nassar deal, the doctor that basically did kind of very nasty things over many years to these gymnasts and people that he was treating that were just minors, little girls. Well, right? I don't think he woke up one day and said, this is what I want to do with my life. What happened was it started with a curiosity. And that curiosity led to some sort of excitement, fulfillment, and then it needed more, and it needed more. And so you might be saying, well, I'm not a sexually immoral person. But it doesn't start with, I'm going to go out and I'm going to cheat on my spouse. It doesn't start with, I'm going to go and I'm going to do something that I'm going to regret or go to jail for. It starts out with, hey, I'm going to watch this scene in this movie. Hey, I'm going to look at this website. Hey, I'm going to flirt with that person. Do you see what I'm saying here? And all of the sudden, those steps led you down. So that's why he says even a hint. Everybody say a hint. Don't even have a hint of that. And so you maybe say, it's just private. I'm not hurting anybody with what I'm doing. Well, you're hurting yourself. But also, think about this. If you're not married and you're doing things that are sexually immoral, how is that going to affect the relationship with your future spouse? If you are married, how is that going to affect that dynamic energy with your spouse? Do you see how this is kind of a big one, isn't it? Because it affects so many things. And so I don't know about you. I don't wake up in the morning and say, hey, I'm going to be sexually immoral today. And yet, if we're not on our guard about something like this, if we're not putting up guardrails in our life, if we're not putting some boundaries, then we miss that foundational step. And it's going to affect your relationships. And I'll put it even this way. If you're thinking something inappropriate with a coworker while you're flirting with them, do you think it's going to affect your ability to do your job? We'll just put it on a real basic level. It's all the way through. So that's why Paul starts with the big one, because that talks about the core character of who you are, doesn't it? All right, number 2, don't be greedy. Right, because you guys woke up and said, I'm going to be greedy today too. So he continues verse 3. So it says, don't even have a hint of sexual immorality or any kind of impurity or greed, because these are improper for God's holy people. Have you ever been around someone who only calls you when they want something? Anybody? Put your hand up if you've experienced that. We've all kind of experienced that, right? That, my friends, is greed playing out. We're not talking about just crazy greedy, like I'm going to manipulate the system so that I get everybody's money at everybody else's expense. Obviously, don't do that either, right? Don't do that. But Greed has so many ways to play out. And if you've ever been in that relationship that is a convenience relationship, you can feel used real quick. And that type of greed that somebody just wants something from you, they don't actually care about you and your soul. If you end up in that mode, like person is a means to an end, an advancement in my career, it makes me feel better in this moment when I talk to them. You know, whatever it is, if it's just a means to an end, a convenience relationship, that's greed. And when greed is at the core, it always leads to using someone or taking advantage of someone. And here's the other thing. Greed can also cause you to dismiss people, right? If you're in a marriage or working on a project with your coworkers, or it doesn't matter. Think about the or the wife who is more concerned with their career and advancing their career and the money that's attached to that or the power that's attached to that rather than the relationship that's attached to that. They dismiss this person because their greed is focused a different direction. Could be the same way in work, right? You dismiss your coworker because you're trying to advance yourself. So we could keep going, but greed can also cause us to dismiss people because we're focused on the thing or the results rather than the relationship. You guys tracking so far? So number 1, don't be sexually immoral. Number 2, don't be greedy. Number 3, no dirty talk. That I thought that would get a bigger reaction, guys. I mean, we're talking about relationships here. I'm not talking dirty talk like that. Pick up verse 4. Nor should there be any obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking, which are out of place, but rather thanksgiving. For of this you can be sure, no immoral, impure, or greedy person, such a person is an idolater, has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God. And so I'm not talking about anything gross. Instead, how many of us are certain that words can be hurtful? Right? How many of you have hurt somebody with your words deliberately? I have, out of sheer spite. Right? And so when we're talking about coarse language, we're not just talking dirty jokes, but obscenity, foolish talk, coarse joke, like all of the things that spew venom out of our mouths, destructive wake in our relationships. Can I get an amen to that? And over time, if that's the only thing coming out of your mouth, you are going to repel the people that care about you the most. Can I get a double amen on that one? Right? I love this, but rather thanksgiving. If you are around someone who is speaking thanksgiving, they're putting fuel into your fire. They're lifting you up. Will Smith this week on Facebook had a post that I never actually get on Facebook to watch people, but someone told me about this post that Will Smith did. And so I watched it. And it was about fanning into flame. And he said the people that are around you, if they're speaking negativity and criticism all the time, they're never for you. Those are not the people you want to be around. You want to be around the people that are speaking into you and lifting you up, pulling the best out of you and cheering for you, ensuring that you get fanned into flame the best in you. That's thanksgiving rather than obscenity, foolish talk, or coarse joking. You guys get what I'm saying? So in this situation, when we're talking about no dirty talk, I wonder how many of us, we don't think anything about what we say. And so we just spout off. Not thinking about saying will affect every relationship you have. And by the way, it will turn off potential future relationships that you would want. It's a killer. And so what's coming out of our mouths matters. And by the way, last week we read that verse that a good tree produces good fruit, and out of the heart the mouth speaks, right? So what is inside of you ultimately comes out with what you speak. And so maybe this is a judgment call on the character of person, which is why it's foundational to that building block. So number 1, don't be sexually immoral. Number 2, don't be greedy. Number 3, no dirty talk. Number 4, no lies. Now that seems rather straightforward, doesn't it? But listen to the verse. It says, let no one deceive you with empty words. Because of such things, God's wrath comes on those who are disobedient. Therefore, do not be partners with them. Do not be partners with them. I don't think I need to talk about lies that much. Everybody knows what a lie is, yes? And here's the thing. Sometimes even little white lies come back to haunt you, don't they? And so maybe if we're just speaking the truth, and sometimes you can be guarded with how you talk about the truth. You say, I'm not going to talk about that part, but what I will tell you is this, right? But if someone lies to you and you find out down the road, how crushed are you about that relationship? How many of you have had a relationship, be it a romantic one or a friend one or a coworker one or whatever, that someone lied, and when the truth came later, you were devastated? It hurts, right? It rocks us to the core. Build the foundation for a really good relationship. We've got to ensure, we've got to make the decision now and then live out of that decision going forward that we're not going to lie. It's just that simple. Empty talk. This one is fun for me. Have you ever been around someone who tells you what you want to hear? They're speaking something, and then they're just doing their own thing, whatever they want to do over here. How would that work? What type of integrity does that bring if someone's empty words keep hitting you? It doesn't help. And if you're the one giving the empty words, like, here, let me give you empty praise and tell you what you want to hear, and then I'm going to go do whatever I want to do anyway. By the way, that's one of the fastest ways to turn me off in a relationship. My dad calls it, this may be inappropriate. I'm going to say it anyway. My dad says, don't blow dirt or something like that. Has anybody ever heard that expression? I don't know where it came from. That just popped in my head, and I felt like you needed it today. Empty talk. We got to get away from it. Okay, those were the don'ts. Everybody ready for the do's? All right, because the do's are a little more fun. So here we go. Let's jump into number 5. Be light. Verse 8. For you were once darkness, but now are light in the Lord. Live as children of light, for the fruit of the light consists in all goodness, righteousness, and truth, and find out what pleases the Lord. Everybody, let's repeat that. Let's find out what pleases the Lord. Let's repeat that line right there. Find out what pleases the Lord, having nothing to do with fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. It is shameful to mention what is disobedient, what the disobedient do in secret. But everything exposed by light becomes visible, and everything that is illuminated becomes a light. This is why it is said, wake up, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine on you. Living as light. I love that because he doesn't say you can become. He says you are light. Live as light. How many of you have met someone who's like, and I'm not saying with a mental illness, but like a chronic downer, like always negative, right? Maybe we should, instead of Velcroing to the worst, we should Velcro to the best. Next week, we're going to explore a little bit about that. I'm really pumped for next week's message. But living as light means living with integrity. And then what it says, if you're children of light, what happens? It exposes all goodness, righteousness, and truth. The beauty of living as light is you don't have to try harder. It's who you are. It's who you are. So you're not going to fix a relationship by trying harder. Hard as I wanted to figure out where those two boards went to that desk to try to fix it, I couldn't figure it out. And you can't figure it out by trying. What you do is submit to Christ and allow him to light. And then when you bring that into a relationship, what is it? Righteousness, truth, beauty. There's an integrity to how you live. And so it's not about trying harder. It's living in the presence of God and God transforming our souls. The beautiful thing about living as light is light, any kind of light, dispenses darkness, right? Darkness is the absence of light. So if you're living as light, you get to expose where the problem areas of relationships are, but not in a negative way, in a healing way. You get to bring light to what is broken and dark, but that requires serious soul work, because what if we're broken and dark? That's why it's about God transforming our hearts and lives, not us getting better at relationships. This isn't a self-help book with 8 steps to fix your thing. This is a thing about you and I allowing God's presence to transform us as light. And then we don't need to lie, right? We don't need to hide anything. We don't need to keep secrets. I mean, sometimes you need to keep secrets, like birthday parties and things like that. But you get what I'm saying. Those unhealthy secrets, they don't need to be kept, because it's all out in the open. It's full integrity when you live as light. Number 6, be opportunistic, and in parentheses, to show love. Look at verse 15. What does it say? Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise, but as wise. Verse 16, making the most of every what? Okay, I'm going to try that again. Making the most of every what? Because the days are evil, therefore do not be foolish, but understand what the Lord's will is. We want to live as wise. At Wayfinders, we start our 3 pillars, right? Love first. The reason why we say love first is because when you are leaning into the way of love, not only will it transform people around you, but it will transform your heart, because it bulldozes those walls that keep you from the life God has called you to. And so we're going to be opportunistic to show love in every relationship you have. That sounds a lot like generosity, doesn't it? Now, how many of you would agree that that is really hard to do with the guy that cuts you off in traffic and is a total, can I say jackwagon? Right? Is a total like, that's really hard. Or how about that boss who's full of empty words, uses your work for their own gain? Okay, let's make it a little more personal. How about when your spouse or your children do something that you just can't believe they did? See, being opportunistic looks for the worst possible moments, and in every moment, to show love and grace to that person. That, my friends, is really, really difficult, isn't it? But when we're opportunistic, we're looking for it. It's a frame of mind. If you have that type of generosity in your relationships, you are going to kill it, my friends. Number 7, be filled with the Spirit. Okay, now I'm about to get personal, right? Because here's what the verse says. Don't get drunk on wine, which leads to debauchery. Instead, be filled with the Spirit. Well, don't get drunk. How many of you would agree when you're drunk, bad things tend to happen? Regretful decisions get made. People get hurt. There's no filter on you being opportunistic with love, it's just a downhill slide. I don't know how to say this other than maybe we need to control our habits so that we can have healthy boundaries in relationships. And so if this is one of those for you, I love how it's combined, though, immediately. It's like a don't get into this, but be filled with the Holy Spirit. Because here's what happens, guys. When you are attuned, and we talked about that the last 2 weeks with direction, when you're attuned with God's Spirit, hearing God's voice, and you're acting on it, all of the sudden, you're not going to do those things which lead to debauchery, which lead to a sea full of regret that you're lugging around with a backpack, and bad late night calls, and waking up not where you know you are, where you don't know where you are. None of that goes with being filled with the Spirit. Instead, being filled with the Spirit, the signs of that are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, self-control. The fruit of the Spirit leads to a totally different kind of life. And if you want to be opportunistic, then when you hear God's voice, ooh, see that person over there? Go do this. And you're like, I don't even know them. All the better. All of a sudden, miracles are popping up around you, and the life that you're living is far more compelling than I got my drink on. So maybe that is a good piece for you on a foundational level to walk in the way of light. Speak praise. Verse 19, speaking to one another with psalms, hymns, and songs from the Spirit, sing and make music from your heart to the Lord. Have you ever been around someone who's always uplifting you, who's always positive? Like, I really want to be around those people. What I love about being married to my beautiful bride is that she always uplifts me. Now, she also tells me the truth, and sometimes that is very difficult to hear. She's very honest with me. Always is uplifting me. She knows when to say, you can do this. I believe you're more than what you are right now. You're capable. Don't we want to be surrounded by people that are uplifting us? And by the way, if you want to be surrounded by people that are pouring into you like that are actually lighting your fire, it starts with you lighting other people's fires. It starts with you speaking beauty and joy and wonder into somebody else's life. If you're waiting for other people to just do it to you and you are not positive, you're not speaking those wonderful psalms and thankful hearts, the tune of your life. We've got coming up later this spring track. Not only are we going to have some great music, but you're going to hear more about this concept. We're going to unpack that from above. So always speak praise, words of praise that always uplift. And here we go. Bonus number 9. Haha, tricked you. Number 9. Always give thanks to God, the Father, for Jesus. Attitude of gratitude makes all the difference. Someone who thanks you for what you do, who sees the hard work that you put in, what you do around the house, the little extra stuff that you did. Someone who recognizes that and just says, thank you. It's going to change every investment in every relationship that you have. By the way, that bonus one is such a big bonus one. If you are in a marriage relationship and you don't have this one, I can guarantee you your marriage is not a happy one. Guarantee it. But it doesn't have to wait for marriage. You can have the attitude of gratitude in every relationship, and people are going to be flocking to you because that foundation for any person coming into a relationship with you is so strong and so healthy and so good. People are going to want to get to know you. And when they want to get to know you, they're going to want to get to know the God that has transformed you into living as light because you're walking in the way of love. And you know what I like about that? How many of you have a bath mat right outside your shower? And usually soaks up all the water. But then when you start walking around, you get those little footprints. Well, not only do we have a bath mat that is useless because it soaks up nothing, but I don't know if you've ever tried to bathe 4-year-olds. They don't stick to one space. And as soon as they're out, they're just flying around, and their little footprints are everywhere with little water droplets leaving a wake behind. And I imagine what Paul is picturing when he says we get to walk into the way of love and build up our foundation as people for positive, healthy relationships. He's talking about like little droplets of love just being everywhere we step, is little steps that go like that. And people begin to flock to us because they can see the path that we are on, and they want to be around it. Every puzzle piece or the puzzle piece that is on a seat near you. Yeah, you have a puzzle piece. Here, I'm going to grab one for those that are watching online. We have a puzzle piece. Now, this puzzle piece is actually a Dr. Seuss puzzle that I stole from my children, okay? In case you're wondering what it is, because I know if I didn't tell you, some of you, that would just bug you like crazy. You have a puzzle piece. In verse 21 of Ephesians chapter 5 says this: submit to one another out of reverence for Christ. Submit is the word hupostaso. It's the Greek word hupostaso. It means serve. It means honor. It means give space to. Every one of these puzzle pieces is unique. It's different. And each and every one of us are different. We're unique. And so walking in the way of love, living as children of light, taking these 8 steps seriously is kind of like out the piece to be exactly the way that God designed you to be. And then, after you have your piece in the right form, all of a sudden, you get to start interlocking with the other pieces around you in a relationship. And when they start coming together, what do they form in puzzles? They form a beautiful picture, even if it is Dr. Seuss. They form a beautiful picture. And so maybe this morning you need to allow God to shape your puzzle piece. You've got one of those 8 that's stuck out like crazy, and you're like, oh, yep, I got to cut that tag off my puzzle piece because that's keeping me from interlocking over here. That's keeping me from the relationship with my spouse. That's blocking my future spouse. That's keeping me from my relationship at work. That's keeping me from my best relationship with my kids because I haven't allowed God to hone my puzzle piece the right way. By the way, that represents the true you, the you that God sees from the very start. Again, it's not about you becoming better. It's about you learning to submit to God's presence. And when we do that, the interlocking picture of you and I together walking in the way of love creates a beautiful picture for our world and our lives. So God shapes the puzzle piece. We come together to make a beautiful picture, and the relationship is the connection. Everybody just do this with me. Hold your puzzle piece and close your eyes. Just hold that puzzle piece out and just close your eyes. What are the areas that need to be shaved off? What are the areas that you need to work on, to do, in order to become the peace that God has designed you to. If you're really going to walk in the way of love, is it sexual immorality? Is it what comes out of your mouth is really indicating that there's a problem in your heart because it's coarse language? Is it empty language? Are you speaking to people but doing whatever you want, and so it's shallow, it's empty, it's not real relationships? Do you need to be something different? Do you need to have the attitude of gratitude? What is it that's keeping you from being the you that God has designed you to? Let's shape that part today. Heavenly Father, thank you that you've made each and every one of us unique. Thank you for every bit of relationship, for the good ones, for the bad ones, for the ones that we don't understand why you put that person into our lives. You've blessed us with relationship, and so now, Father, I just ask that you would help us set the foundation and build the foundation, because we are the common denominator in every relationship we have.